Welcome back to another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Richard Thompson, and today I'm joined by Kimball, one of the Sunshine Coast's most respected litigation lawyers who built a firm from a tiny Mooloolaba shopfront into a thriving practice for over 3 decades. Kyle shares his journey from a rebellious Naval Academy dropout to a courtroom fighter, the personal toll litigation took on him, and the moment he knew it was time to walk away. Whether you are at career crossroads or chasing a healthy relationship with stress, this conversation is for you. All right, let's get into it. Kyle Kimball, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
Now, your history and I guess you're so well known here on the Sunshine Coast and more broadly in Queensland as well as one of the best litigation lawyers out there, now retired. I want to first go back to your upbringing, and your family was service military sort of focused, but when we spoke, you explained that early days you had this sort of feeling of not wanting to be told what to do.
Yeah, I grew up on a naval base in Sydney until we moved up here for high school, and I was always destined to be in the Navy, wanted to fly. I got a scholarship, went to the Defence Academy, but lasted about 6 months. It was just, for whatever, even though I'd grown up around that sort of discipline and knew what I was getting into, it just didn't turn out what I expected. And and I really struggled to be told what to do. I don't know whether it was because I was no longer at home and felt that I could be free, but yeah, and so I left, much to the disappointment of my folks, and I kind of fell into law. Like it was never something that I'd planned on doing. It sort of when I got my school grades, I realised I could have got into law, but I just dismissed it. It wasn't an option that I was interested in. And then when I came home, I sort of messed about for a little bit, but knew I had to do something. And I got an interview with Munro Thompson, and this is back in '88, and had enrolled to QT to do law externally, and because I wanted to work, I didn't want to just go to uni. Mum and Dad couldn't afford it. That was where I ended up.
Can you take me back to the decision in your mind to take that interview with Munro Thompson?
I'd written to half a dozen firms around the coast.
Why that industry?
Munro's, it was as simple as I think somebody that my mother worked for knew Neil Thompson. There was no plan. I mean, my family had no business background. I'd never been exposed to anything like that. I was young and enthusiastic and wanted to change the world like all teenagers do. And I thought that, as much as law wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, I could see it as a stepping stone perhaps to politics.
Sure.
Or something like that might allow me to exercise some sort of influence.
And what was Kyle like, early 20s?
Loud, annoying, frightened. One of the funny things about law is to be successful in practice, you have to display an air of confidence, but particularly in the early days, you know nothing. And so balancing that is quite difficult. Particularly as an article clerk, I was sort of thrown in the deep end. The firm didn't do a lot of litigation. It was a primarily property and commercial firm with some amazing clients, but litigation comes from that. And they always struggle to keep a litigation lawyer for whatever reason. And I was always Johnny on the spot. So that's how I was in it from the get-go. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fight. I'm naturally curious, wanting to know what happened, and a good sense of right and wrong helped me work quite well in the litigation area very quickly. But it was, there were plenty of times I'd come home, cry myself to sleep in the pillow. What the hell am I doing here? And the bosses were quite happy for me to do it. They didn't want to know, and so it was tough. But I mean, in the long run, it's by far been the best thing that happened,
Litigation is usually about winning and losing. Did that shape the way your personality outside work at that time?
Look, probably. But I mean, from a very early age, my grandmother used to tell me that I'd argue the point with St. Peter at the pearly gates. So the ability to, and I always loved debate, arguing a case came kind of naturally. It very quickly becomes, or at least it did for me, a part of your identity. You hang on to that, I think. And so for me, that drove me to be as good as I could. But in terms of winning and losing, I think I was very lucky. I mean, I had some good barristers that I worked with. But I think that lawyers tend to think that they certainly promote themselves as winning and losing cases. And the reality is your clients and the evidence is what wins and loses a case. I mean, there are so many things that are outside your control. Our job, we don't have a dog in the fight. Our job is to put the best case forward, work as hard as you can to get the evidence, run the best arguments. But beyond that, it's out of your control. So I think the idea that we might win all these cases, as much as we might like to promote it, is only a very small part of the story.
We had a panel a few weeks ago, which had the fortunate experience to lead with you on it. And one of the pieces of advice you gave to the audience was remember, you didn't have a dog. You don't have the dog in the fight. It's not your fight to take personally. Talk to me about when did that hit with you in your career?
Yeah.
How long did it take?
Probably a very long time. I've like a lot of lawyers. I mean, it's hard not to take things personally. It's hard not to get involved, particularly I think I don't know about some lawyers that do work where you might see a client for a case and that's the end of it. I mean, my firm was a commercial litigation firm, and we had clients for decades, and you can't not have personal relationships with those people, with those clients. And that impacts how you see the litigation, whether it should or it shouldn't is beside the point. It does. We're human. I mean, the real gift is the ability to be able to step outside that and give the clients the advice they need and what they need to hear, as opposed to what you want. That's not always easy, but it's absolutely necessary. When did I find it? Look, I couldn't say there was a particular point in time or a case that I could say that's where it happened. I think particularly in the later years of practice, I started to get or become more sensitive to lawyers becoming involved in their cases and having an opinion about certain things. And it would be, whether it was in it manifested in correspondence or in submissions or in appearances in court. They were so intimately tied up and just funny little things like, side comments, which to the layperson would appear harmless or nothing, but something like saying something was curious, or we are amused, or I am, confused, or it's got nothing to do with you, and that sort of thing, which, as I said, to the layperson, it might seem innocuous. The reality is it's
there's an undertow.
Yeah, and it's not about you, so it doesn't matter whether it's curious. And that, from towards the end of my practice versus the start, I don't recall seeing that sort of thing. And I long had a habit of you would see something come in and it would upset you because, as our job as lawyers, we're peer reviewed every day, so that can't not have an impact on you, unless you're some sort of sociopath. But, the way to deal with it, I found, and my business partner, we'd get something and it might particularly get under our skin. We'd write whatever we wanted to write and then send it to each other, call it our Abe Lincoln, which was derived from, there was a story I read somewhere about Abraham Lincoln was renowned for never having said a bad word about anybody. After he died, in the resolution desk, they found a whole bunch of letters that he'd apparently written, which were all these scathing letters that he'd written to or about people that had obviously upset him over the years. But he wrote them and just put them in the drawer, and that was it.
It's fantastic.
And it serves the purpose. It's not and that's the whole point. It's not about the other person. It's how you're responding to whatever. And if you let it, you get it down, get it out, and it's done. The trick was just to make sure you emailed it to your partner and not back to the person.
It's an I've not actually considered the peer review thought to the profession because, you've busted your shoulder at the moment, nursing that, but your physio writes to you advice or doesn't have to deal with any other physio or your doctor's giving you advice and doesn't have to report to another doctor. You're not, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. You every day you're corresponding with another colleague of yours in the profession.
And it's their job to take, an alternate point of view or a different point of view.
That's their job.
So yeah, it does get to you after a while, I think.
So you didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial household or exposed to that. When did it dawn on you that I need to start my own firm? I want to start my own firm, and those sort of iterations? Because there's a lot of lawyers that simply don't and are happy just to be an employee for their career.
After I finished my degree and was admitted, I went off overseas for 6 months, which was a great holiday. Came back and having had, I guess, a little bit of independence. I mean, I'd always been given a free rein, as I said, I was sort of thrown in the deep end, but the more I got into practice, the more experience I got, the more confident I became. So I wasn't having to answer to anybody as long as I met my targets and reported to the boss. He was fine. I'd go to him for guidance on certain things, and that's not to say he left me alone. I mean, I learned a lot from my master and my supervising partner about how to deal with people and how to run a practice and things like that. But in terms of practicing law, they just said that's we're not litigators.
Probably helped in the moment for a young Kyle Kimball who didn't want to be told what to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, and it got to a point where, particularly once I was admitted, it was like, well, I want to do things a certain way. And I knew it was the boss's firm, and I didn't want to be partners with them for various reasons. And I guess I knew, and Tommy Wood, a good mate of mine who worked with me at Munro's for a while, he was idle at the time, and we went on one of our bushwalks and had a chat and said, yeah, let's go do it. And after that, we set up in 97 in a little shop next to a bikini store and opposite the surf club in, a little shop in Mooloolaba on River Esplanade, and that was where we kicked off.
How do you reflect on, you've built that firm for almost 3 decades. How do you reflect on that period of time of owning?
Those early days were a lot of fun. I mean, didn't have any money, but then you didn't have anything to lose either. I think, starting a practice at 27 was a great thing because, the future was all opportunity and possibility. You could make decisions that, the consequences of which it didn't matter. And I was lucky. I got some very good cases very early on, had some very good clients very early on, had a plan as to where we wanted to go. I never wanted to practice law forever. I always thought it was, a responsibility to practice it well and do as good as a job as I could. But both Tom and I, when we set up, we said, well, we want to be out by a certain time. Now I ended up with a wife and 4 kids, so that sort of extended the due date a little bit, or the expiry date a little bit longer. But to see how the firm grew from what it was, where, we'd shut the door at lunchtime, go over the beach and divert the phones, and that was how the afternoon was spent because we just had nothing to do, to a busy, thriving practice. And it's grown, and we've had points where we've had nearly 50 staff down to, I think it was 13 or 14 when I left. I've had numerous partners over the years from whom I learned enormous things legally and practice-wise, business-wise, people-wise. None of it, the practice, I think, was quite a successful practice. It wasn't everything I hoped it could be, but it was a lot more than I ever thought it would be. And that's down to everybody that was in it, even the people I didn't get along with, I learnt plenty from. But I equally, it was time to go too.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because obviously you've got some sort of recipe in there that's that's allowing the firm to be incredible. Was there some sort of ingredient there was also costing you, do you think? Take to me back to this sort of, when does Kyle Kimball start thinking maybe I need to move on?
I mean, we rebranded to Sagen back in 2004, and that was part of a conscious decision to try and get, because previously it had been Kimball Wood and then Kimball's. Everyone else wanted to keep their name away from it. We rebranded to Sagen with a view to this. I wanted to have this firm that would be this independent entity that could be more than the sum of its parts, more than the individuals. You know, I mean, law is a profession where individuals, you know, build their own personal brands, and that can be a real difficulty when it comes time to getting out. And I always had that in mind, that there will come a time to get out. And so we built this firm, but despite my best efforts, for whatever reason, everyone I spoke to still said, "Oh, well, we know it's Sagen, but it's you." And not being one to be told what to do, I just chose to ignore that. But I always planned to have somebody come and hopefully tap me on the shoulder and tell me I was old and dottery and it was time to go. But I got to the point where, things like what I was talking about before with lawyers taking things on a lot more personally. Getting people to stay and buy in is a difficult thing in a professional services firm. We worked hard to build a culture, but I wasn't sure that it was the one that was needed necessarily for the future. You know, this new generation of law students and business owners, they've got a different attitude to things. So I was lucky enough to have two younger partners who, I think one's just turned 40, Tim, who these guys bought me out 2 years ago, but they'd worked with the firm for a long time, and I'd managed to hang on to them even though there was plenty of people come and go like most law firms. And I think it got to the point where they were ready to step up, chomping at the bit, young blokes, young families. They had different ideas about how things should be, and I didn't want to spend the next sort of 5 to 10 years arguing the toss with them over that.
Because you had that opportunity, as in the run, you still had a good, I think, 15 years if you wanted it.
For sure. But I didn't think I had the energy to put my heart and soul into it, particularly if I was going to be arguing the toss with these boys. And equally, I know that I couldn't just sit back and watch either as some sort of innocent bystander and hope that it all goes well. I just wasn't possible. Combine that with, being a bloke who's been in the game for 36 years, and I never like to think of myself as conservative, but I would sit in court. Like my last court case was I was running a pro bono case for a lady who was charged with offences relating to a dangerous dog, and I was a staffy, and I love staffies, had one, and so I'll help her out. And I'm sitting in court, and there's a lawyer who's there, and he's got no jacket on, and his shirt tails are hanging out, and the magistrate says nothing. And then the prosecutor on my case, who runs a bunch of submissions around which changes the facts that we'd agreed on, and nothing. And I had to object to that. And I'm just thinking, what's going on? For me, it's probably me. I don't know if the magistrate is happy with that in her court. Well, that's a matter for her. But I'm thinking, I don't want to be distracted by these sorts of things. And for me, it was like, if there was ever any doubt, I didn't want to be that grumpy old prick.
Any more than you were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that with the boys ready to come on, and I'm still young enough to reinvent myself and do something else. So, and I've got plenty of things that I wanted to do, and my kids have left school. So, if I didn't do it, I would end up being that bloke that got tapped on the shoulder.
Was it hard to hand over something you've built?
No.
For so many years?
No, not in the slightest. I was asked a lot about that, the legacy, and the legacy is not the firm. That's, for me, that idea of a legacy was always, and my kids and family, for me, that's the important thing. The firm was a business. I mean, that's why, we rebranded it. We wanted it to be able to walk away from. Clients and relationships with it, the ones that are valuable, I've maintained. So, it wasn't difficult at all.
Hey guys, just popping in quickly to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, it would mean a lot if you take a second to follow the show. Leave a like or review and share it with a friend. That support genuinely helps us grow and keep bringing you more great conversations every single week. All right, let's get back into it. You mentioned earlier about identity. How has the last few years been? You've been revered on the Sunshine Coast as
Cool, I don't know about that.
as the litigator. Well, not if you're on the other
Reviled,
side,
possibly.
not on the other side. But yeah, you that was your identity, and now no longer. How has that been to deal with internally?
Liberating.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it was difficult at first. I didn't, I think I might have said it at the panel the other day. No one ever sees you as you see yourself. And I honestly don't know what the fuss was about or why. I never thought I was good enough at what I did. And so for me, it was a relief to not have that constant peer review.
The pressure.
Yeah, I mean, and litigation too. It was a lifetime of constant conflict, which I did take home, and it wasn't, I didn't exactly engage in healthy pursuits for a lot of that time to manage the stress, like a lot of lawyers. Drink is a big thing, and I didn't like who I was generally. And
Did that deteriorate over time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that do you think that was because of the continued nature of litigation, or is it because you were finding your feet more and more and the cases and clients you were representing were more and more at stake for them that you were taking home?
Look, it could have been a combination of those things. Certainly. I mean, it was funny. People, and you'd get the same thing. I mean, clients will say to you, I don't know how you do this job. And my response was always, well, it's not my fight. It's not my problem. You're the one who's in trouble. And which is true. But again, like I said, you can't help but take these things on. And
you are fighting.
Yeah. And it is. And then not only are you fighting, you're taking significant sums of money off people for the work that you do, which the more I practiced, the less I had any real faith in the system and its effectiveness. Now, maybe I am still naive and
Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in good and right and justice. And as I say, that's probably incredibly naive. And the legal system doesn't provide that. It's a system to stop people going around beating each other with sticks to solve their problems. It masquerades as a justice system or as a process for providing justice, and in a philosophical sense, it does. I mean, and I'm a strong believer in the rule of law, but its practical application, has a lot to be desired.
What's it missing?
There's politics, there's people. I mean, people are humans. I don't know. I would get upset with silly things like, we know how matters are supposed to be run in court. It's funny. AI is a great example. There's a lot of song and dance about lawyers putting up hallucinations from AIs in submissions, cases that don't exist.
Right.
From a long time, I've been in court and lawyers have been happy to advance authorities for propositions that don't exist or misread cases, misrepresented cases, run submissions without any evidence to support them. I mean, that sort of thing has gone on for ages, and no one got worked up about that. And those sorts of things, when you're telling on the one hand, we're supposed to, as officers of the court, as lawyers, we are obliged, I think, to encourage our clients to have faith in the system, to trust, notwithstanding that your directions hearings are, honoured more in the breach than the observance, and he's not going to disclose those documents. Well, no, you got to trust that they will, and they'll do the right thing. And the system depends on everyone doing the right thing, and the reality is that they don't. And again, super naive, possibly, but that doesn't mean I can't hope for something better. And yeah, I guess I got frustrated with that
Over time or continued?
more and more so over time, because I think as I got older and more experienced, I realized there wasn't a way of remedying that. And it's probably always been like that. But I thought, if this is something I'm part of, there's only so long you can hide from it. And for me, it was about being open with it. I mean, plenty of people are fine with it. Lawyers don't care. And that's not a criticism. It's like, well, it's pragmatic. Get on with it. This is the job I'm doing. And I may be putting too much on it, to be honest. But for me, it mattered. And eventually I just got to the point where I couldn't deal with that anymore, was tired of it. And it just felt false or lacking in authenticity, and taking large amounts of money off people for that sort of thing. And when you're not getting, a barrister used to say to me, he said, tell your clients if they want a guarantee, buy a fridge. I said, well, yeah, that's kind of cynical though, isn't it? And probably, going back to your question about identity, probably for the first 6 months while I defragged and sort of just lay about, licking my wounds, and being relieved at no longer having to answer calls or explain complex issues to people. I guess I struggled a little bit with, well, nobody's calling you anymore. What are
That's
they
one. There is something beautiful about that.
There-
Being dependent.
Yeah,
dependent on.
Exactly. And I guess I always knew it sort of, before I left even, that intellectually that there's all these people in my life who depend on me enormously. But the moment I can't provide what I provide for them, I'm of zero consequence and don't matter in their life anymore. And as I said, I knew that intellectually, but it wasn't until I was out that actually came to pass. And I was a little bit, strangely, upset about it. That confused me.
I guess it's also to get to that point of understanding that may be the case, but that doesn't diminish your value as a human.
Yeah, and that was it. But it also was like, well, now I know who the real people are, because I always questioned it. Do these people who I cherished as good friends and colleagues, are they really, or are they just in it because I can provide something to them? And now I know, I know who's who, and that's been great. And it also, for all my frustrations at the law, I mean, after I opened my consulting practice, sort of, I guess it would have been 8 to 10 months after I left law, because I missed the colleagues and the people and just the camaraderie, which, it's fun, So, and getting into a gig where I'm counselling and mentoring lawyers and helping them deal with the same issues and problems that I faced all the time, but being able to be outside of it and you see it so much differently now. Or, like I was saying before, the trustee appointment. I've managed and represented trustees for sale for years, so I know the gig inside out, and that reputation that I built, at least I can use that still. So,
you talk about how you had proclivities to avail yourself from the pressures of each day, but it seems like there's been a fair amount of growth that people don't see internally as the years have progressed, and you've gone from someone maybe who wasn't able to, or was struggling to handle all the stress and expectation and obligations, and taking that home, and then impacting obviously outside of work, to then someone who's been able to work through that to see, I guess, the macro and what's important. Has that been with intent, or has that been by the sort of?
It was. I'm lucky to have an incredibly patient and understanding wife who is very good with people, and she didn't like to see what the law was doing to me or what I was doing to myself. At her sort of prompting, it was sort of eventually, as a lawyer, we're very good at assigning blame and responsibility for things, particularly as a litigator. Eventually, Sadie said to me, she said, look, it's not, stop looking outside yourself Stop trying to blame everyone else. You'll always find someone, but it's out of your control. You can't change them. You can't change the law. You know, it's you got to look at yourself. Where if for example, staff was a great example. You know, I'd turn myself inside out trying to adjust and work out a way to be able to keep staff and train. You know, you'd train them and then they move on, and it's the way of the world. But I always took that personally. And she said, you know, stop blaming them. Stop being upset that they're disloyal or that they want to go somewhere else or they don't want to be lawyers. Start looking at yourself and with that, you know, and she was right. And it has been a long, and I'm a very slow learner with these sorts of things. But recognizing that the only thing that you have any control over is yourself and how you respond to things really was, you know, eye-opening and good. I mean, I'm not perfect at it, but it certainly helps to know that I've got control over those things that happen in my life, or at the very least, as I say, how I respond to them. And that was part of, you know, well, ultimately, if the law is going to continue to be this way, either I change or I get out of it. And that was, you know, well, that was the decision that was made.
How do you view that shift of perspective of almost extreme ownership that you have from eventually learning from that? Do you look back and go, I wish I had that earlier in my career?
Definitely. Yeah. And that sense of accountability and responsibility, which, I mean, I've always had a sense of duty, which I think has helped me with my practice. I understood that. You know, taught to be responsible from a very early age as part of my upbringing. But there was always that tension. And I think if I'd have been able to learn it earlier, it would have made life a hell of a lot easier, to the extent, you know, I tried to impart that on staff and my partners, and I'd certainly try and teach my kids that. But, you know, everyone has to learn at their own pace and in their own way. And yeah, exactly. So for me, it was a little bit, well, hey, it worked for me. And if it works for me, it's going to work for anybody else. You know,
35 years in litigation. What has been your takeaways as what do people get wrong in conflict?
I think that very point, that trying to assign blame or giving up the control over your life by putting it in the hands of everybody else. I mean, that doesn't mean that a fight isn't warranted sometimes. The most common advice I gave to clients in litigation was walk away. You know, seriously, and I used to use the old pub analogy, you know, like if you're in a bar, you know, and everyone's on the sauce and, you know, you can get into a fight, you walk away.
There's not a lot of good coming out of it.
No, that's exactly right. You don't, there are certain occasions where you have to have a fight, but they're nowhere near as common as people think. So much of it is about ego and you know, if you can afford it and that's the way you want to live your life, that's fine. It's not for me to judge. And, you know, go on lining lawyers' pockets. You know, they all deserve a feed, or most of them anyway. But yeah, it's, if you can, you know, even the most basic fight, we would see contract disputes or, you know, a shareholder argument. Oh, that person, the bad guy, you know, well, you made the decision not to get advice at the start. You didn't get proper legal advice. There is always some part of what's happened that is on you. And if you can accept that, it kind of allows you to not get so caught up. And that you might still make the conscious decision to have the fight, but you're better informed about it, and you can make better decisions then.
Are the disputes mostly are about money, but are they underlying, is that something a bit deeper you find as a constant undertow? Ego?
For sure. Well, ego, and that's not to mean, probably identity is a better description for it. It depends on the nature. I mean, a lot of our clients were generally people who paid our bills out of their own pocket. Okay, that was, I guess, how we described it. We did have clients who, you know, when we would act for government or for large corporations, in those instances, it's generally about someone's covering their backside. That's a different motivator. But ultimately, even someone covering their backside, it still comes down to their own identity, their role in that organisation, whether they're going to be in trouble or whether they've made the right decision previously. But the individuals who are paying out of their own pocket, it comes down to their identity. Are they going to lose their home? What does that mean to their family, to their friends? If they failed in business, did they make a wrong choice going into business with this person? It all comes down to identity, ultimately. As I say, doesn't mean you don't have the fight, but understand what's really motivating the decisions you make when you want to have a fight and why you're prepared to spend the money that you're going to spend.
Your clients, you had a lot of wealthy clients who potentially were not as content as you are right now. What did you learn from them as clients?
Yeah, I mean, I had some clients who, worth squillions, and they were no happier than anybody else. The money isn't what makes people happy. When I was a young bloke, I did a lot of personal injuries work, and it was so funny that the people who had the worst injuries seemed, in the main, to the people as the people more capable of getting on with their lives than the people who had, lost the end of a finger or a toe, or, it's a strange thing. I don't know why. But yeah, the money and how successful you are in business or life, or how others see you anyway, isn't the answer.
What do you reckon drove you, Kyle? Because you're someone who, it's sort of known that law wasn't your passion. You just, as you said, you fell into it and just kept going with it. And whether or not you agree with me, very good at it. Was it the 4 kids? What? Because
again, that's using it as an excuse, and I did. Your kids will love you whatever you do.
Sure.
So it's a bit of a glib bloody excuse. It was, I guess, more than anything, just a sense of duty and obligation. And you've got to do something at the end of the day. I mean, I did. Look, I thought long and hard about it.
Over the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
you just seem so intelligent, so capable. You have this underlying position of no one's telling me what to do, and you've seen, as you progress in the career, you see the business, you see other business people. You open your eyes to a lot of things, and yet you stick with for 35 years.
Yeah, well, paid well, I guess.
With the 4 kids.
For a while. I mean, look, the early years were tough.
Yeah.
It took a long time to build to a position where we did very well. And again, that's up to a lot of people. It wasn't any particular genius on my part, more good luck, I think, than anything else. But look, fundamentally, and this was the conclusion I came. If I did nothing else, I'd have to be down the river hunting for mud crabs or fish. You've got to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably flirted with being something of a nihilist for a while, but then I just realized that was just pointless. Practice was good to me. For as much as I might not have enjoyed it like some people do, it was very good to me. And it gave me choices, gave my family choices that a lot of other people don't have. It's introduced me to people that I would never meet otherwise. And who knows, it may well give me opportunities into the future that I don't know. So I don't regret it at all. If there was any regrets, it would purely be the manner in which I dealt with my own issues rather than the law itself.
Before we wrap it up, there was one thing you spoke to me on the phone, was this pivotal moment where your wife Sadie came into the firm and worked with the firm, and often would be the case. And I was expecting the story to be that it was the worst decision of all time, because I can imagine there's a lot of people listening that goes, God, if my wife or my husband or my partner came into my workplace, it wouldn't be great. But it was quite the opposite.
Yeah, and it's funny because that was what we thought would be the case. We would, if we didn't alienate all of the staff, like is often what can happen, unfortunately, we would, kill each other. but it was, for me, it was the single best thing we did in our firm forever, across all its years. I think, and it kind of ties in with one of the questions you asked before, which I probably didn't answer very well. One thing lawyers could do better, and it sounds trite, but is listen. And as lawyers, we listen to our clients with a view to, or we ask them questions and we want to know the answer because we've formed a view of what this case is about and I need the evidence to support that case. And that's not wrong. You know, we're taught in a certain way how we deal with legal problems, and whether it's litigation or drafting a contract or, you know, whatever it is, we approach things. We need the relevant material from our client, and clients are paying, and whether it's by the hour, retainer, whatever, there's a cost to that, and so we're mindful of that, and so are clients. But invariably, clients go away not heard. They don't feel heard. They don't feel secure. They don't feel safe. They don't feel looked after. And that's because we don't listen to them. And as I mentioned before, Sadie is, she's the most incredibly patient woman, but she's genuinely interested in people and their stories. And just out of pure chance, I mean, we had her come in, was supposed to just answer the phones for a little while we found someone new when our receptionist had left. And she didn't want to, but she said, "Oh, right, I'll come and do it for a couple of days." And she couldn't help herself, but, you know, a client would come in and she'd sit with them for an hour and just hear them. And so that we then, as the lawyers, would be introduced to this client, and we could get straight to the point. She'd say, "Yep, these are the key issues for them. And if there was something that we need to be mindful of, she'd tell us." But they told her their story and the things that they thought were important, and then came to us and, righto, what is it that you need to know for your case? But they always went away being heard. And Sadie applied that to whether it was, you know, you get the people who should be down at the community legal service or who have some other case or don't have a case, or she would still listen to them. And all of the staff in the firm could hear her because of the way the office was set up, and so that they learnt that from her. And it just gave, it just improved the relationships with our clients no end, because they always went away feeling heard.
And I suspect, I think you made the comment on the phone that she's, in your words, sort of had to endure Kyle Kimball coming home from work for so many years, and now she's part of it. She could relate and understand what you have to deal with.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it assisted our relationship enormously, because she did understand a lot better than previously. Because, you know, you come home, you're not talking about it. And as a lawyer, you can make excuses about, oh, it's all privileged and confidential, and, you know, that sort of nonsense. I mean, it's not that it's nonsense, but they're the excuses we use, and you just don't want to talk about it after a day of speaking to people. Her being there meant that we didn't have to, and she would understand not just client relationships but staff relationships, and she improved staff relationships enormously too, because the people could talk to her, knowing that I would get the message, but without that conflict or that fear. I mean, for whatever reason, people were always frightened to come and talk to me. I don't know why. I'm just a big teddy bear, but you know, it just made it easy. Now, look, I think every firm should have their Sadie, whoever that might be. It's a super valuable part of any practice.
For people who are listening who can't have the ability to have their spouse come to work with them, with what you've learnt though, is there something you could have done, or what can people do is it just communicating that you're talking about how we don't want to do of an evening after a long day? Because you sort of, I think there's some gold there in the sense of what you guys have been able to do by osmosis or by coincidence, that she understands the dynamic. She understands what you're going through. She understands the stresses of a firm. How can people bottle that and get the same outcome without having to insert their spouse into work?
Look, I mean, it is a communication thing. There's no question about it. I think we like to neatly compartmentalize different parts of our lives. You know, it's a combination of all those things I've talked about. You know, don't get your identity tied up in it. Don't use the booze or drugs or whatever. Mountain biking for me has been, part of that process of healing and getting away from reliance on. I mean, I still love a beer, but being active and fit and strong mentally helps you on a level that is hard to explain until you do it. I mean, you understand that. And I think if you're not looking after yourself physically, you're not. And I'm not a gym junkie or anything. I mean, I found mountain biking. I love it because I love the mountains and the bush and that sort of thing. But whatever it is that you want to do, it helps you mentally, and you need to be strong mentally to be an effective lawyer and an effective husband, father,
human
friend. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So do that, and that will help you communicate more effectively with your wife, your spouse, your clients, your staff. Your question about litigation, I mean, it's invariably a failure to effectively communicate. That drill down, that's
what it is.
That is its very essence. And if you can overcome that, well, you can eliminate a lot of reasons for fighting.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Before you go, 5 quick questions we ask everyone.
Okay.
What does success now mean to you?
Peace.
What does happiness mean to you?
Fleeting. Happiness is a byproduct of things that occur. It's outside your control.
What does your normal morning routine look like now?
Well, when it's not
When the
raining.
sun's out.
Yeah, when it's not raining. Up, down the beach, have a swim if it's not too blowy.
What time are you up?
7.
Alarm?
No, haven't woken up to an alarm unless I've got to get an early flight somewhere for years. We don't have curtains, so sun down near the beach whenever the sun's up where I'm up. Down the beach, swim, come back, coffee, maybe back to bed if I'm really cheeky. I'll write in the mornings.
You're writing a book at the moment?
Yeah.
How's that process been?
Good. Apart from my shoulder injury, which has stopped things for a little while, but it's so enjoyable. I really love it. And in the long run, hopefully that's where I end up writing all the time. Go for a ride, mountain biking, and come home, write again. And that's my
Sounds
day.
amazing.
Oh, look, I am so lucky. And again, I couldn't have done it without law. I pinch myself. And
You'd be still down in the river catching mud crabs.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a problem with that.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice you'd give to the world?
Look at yourself first. It helps understand yourself. It helps with so many other aspects of your life.
And then finally, Kyle, someone that you know who you think would be a great guest for the show.
What about Michael Data?
No, I haven't had Michael Data. I've had lots of wine with him.
With some stories.
Yeah.
And Michael's just mercurial. He's got fingers in a million pies. Very good with people. I think he'd be good.
Kyle Kimball, thank you so much, mate.
Thanks, Richard. Been a pleasure.
That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're out mud crab fishing or maybe grinding through a long session on the bike, turn to the person next to you and tell them all about the show. It really means a lot. A huge thank you to Kyle for sharing 3 decades of hard-won lessons on identity, ego, and letting go. If today's conversation inspired you, please subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. It really makes a difference. Until next time, peace.